The large window showed a beautiful view of space. Commander Ilara Voss stood still, looking at the 5 human ships moving toward her fleet. Her silver skin caught the light from nearby stars as she took a deep breath. "They are finally here," she said quietly. This meeting was important. Humans were new to space travel, but stories about them had spread quickly. They solved problems in ways that surprised other species. The Galactic Council wanted to know more about them. Kira Alton walked up beside Ilara. As the ship's science officer, Kira had studied all available information about humans. "They look so small compared to our ships," Kira said, pointing to the approaching vessels. The human ships were indeed smaller. They lacked the smooth, curved design of Galactic ships. Instead, they were boxy and practical, with visible repair patches on their hulls. "Size isn't everything," Ilara replied. "Those ships crossed the same distance as ours with half the resources." The main bridge door slid open. Captain Mason Grant of the human ship Northern Star walked in with 2 guards. He was shorter than the Galatians but moved with confidence. His dark skin contrasted with his gray uniform, and his eyes showed curiosity as he looked around. "Commander Voss," he said with a small bow. "Thank you for welcoming us. This is our first official meeting with your people." Ilara returned the gesture. "The pleasure is ours, Captain. Your journey through the Cygnus Pass was impressive. Many experienced pilots avoid that route." Mason smiled. "We didn't know it was dangerous until we were halfway through. By then, turning back seemed more risky than continuing forward." "A very human approach," Kira commented, joining them, facing the unknown rather than retreating. The 3 walked toward the command center. Crew members from both species glanced at each other with interest as they passed. "We've prepared quarters for you and your team," Ilara explained. "Tomorrow we'll begin formal talks about trade routes and technology exchange." "I'm particularly interested in your medical technology," Mason said, "and I believe you wanted to learn about our adaptive farming methods." Ilara nodded. "Your ability to grow food in harsh conditions could help many worlds in our alliance." The ship suddenly shook. Warning lights flashed red across the walls. "What's happening?" Mason asked, steadying himself against a wall. Ilara rushed to the nearest computer screen. Her fingers moved quickly over the controls. Her face grew serious as she read the incoming data. "Unidentified ships just appeared near the moon," she said. "They're not responding to communications." Another officer ran up to them. "Commander, they're Vectol warships, 3 heavy cruisers and multiple fighters." Mason looked confused. "Vectol? Who are they?" "They're supposed to be our allies," Ilara said, her voice turning cold. "We've had peace treaties with them for over 50 years. The ship shook again, harder this time. The lights flickered. "They're firing on our outer ships," the officer reported. 2 scout vessels already damaged. Ilara turned to Mason, her face now determined. "Captain Grant, please return to your ship immediately." This was supposed to be a peaceful meeting, but it seems we've all been led into a trap. "I'm not leaving," Mason insisted. "My crew can help. We've faced surprise attacks before." "This isn't your fight," Ilara said. The ship rocked violently. People fell to the floor as the gravity wavered. "Direct hit to our lower decks," someone shouted from across the room. Mason helped Ilara back to her feet. "It seems like it's everyone's fight now," he said. "My engineers can help with repairs, and our ships are small but fast. We can distract the larger vessels." Ilara studied his face for a moment, then nodded. "Very well. Have your people coordinate with mine." She turned to another officer. "Prepare all battle stations. Alert the fleet." As Mason rushed back toward the docking bay to reach his ship, he heard Ilara giving commands behind him. What was supposed to be a friendly first meeting had turned into something much more dangerous. Neither humans nor Galatians knew it yet, but this surprise attack would be the beginning of an unlikely alliance, one that would change the future of both their peoples. Mason ran through the crowded hallway, dodging Galatine crew members rushing to their battle stations. Emergency lights flashed. painting everything in pulses of red. The ship shook again as another blast hit somewhere nearby. "Captain Grant," a voice called from behind. Mason turned to see a young human woman running toward him. Lisa Bennett was his communications officer, and she looked worried. "Lisa, what are you doing here?" "You should be heading back to our ship with the others," Mason said. "That's just it, sir. We can't get back," Lisa explained, catching her breath. "The Vectol have targeted the docking bay. The Northern Star is trapped inside, and we're cut off from it." Mason's face darkened. "What about Rogers and the engineering team?" "They're safe. They were in the engine room studying the Galatian drive systems when the attack began. The Galatians are letting them help with repairs." Another explosion rocked the ship, stronger than before. The gravity flickered, and for a moment they floated inches above the floor before crashing back down. "We need to get to the command center," Mason decided. "If we can't reach our ship, we'll help here." They fought their way through the chaos, finally reaching the command center. Inside, Ilara stood at a large control panel, giving orders. A holographic display showed the battle outside. It didn't look good. 3 Galatian ships were heavily damaged, and the Vectol were pressing their advantage. "Commander Voss," Mason called, "my ship is trapped in your docking bay. My crew and I offer our help here." Ilara nodded without looking away from the display. "We need it. Take position at the secondary weapons control. Your reflexes might be useful." Mason moved to the station she pointed to, while Lisa joined a group of Galatians working on communications. "They're jamming our distress signals," Kira explained to Lisa. "We need to find a way through." On the main screen, a massive Vectol warship moved into attack position. It was twice the size of the largest Galatian vessel and bristled with weapons. "Their flagship is targeting us directly," a Galatian officer reported. "Our shields are already at 40%. Ilara's face showed no fear, only concentration. "Evasive pattern delta. Redirect power from lower decks to strengthen forward shields." The ship lurched as it changed course sharply. Mason held onto his station to stay upright. "Why are they attacking now?" he asked. "And why target this meeting specifically?" "Because of you," Kira said quietly from her station. "The Vectol have always seen themselves as the dominant species in this sector. A new alliance between humans and Galatians would threaten that position." Another hit rocked the ship. Sparks flew from a nearby console. "Shields at 28%, someone called out. "We can't take much more of this." Ilara straightened her back and made a decision. "Prepare my battle armor. I'm going out there." The room fell silent for a moment. Even Mason could feel the weight of her words. "Commander," Kira protested, "that's too dangerous, even with the armor." "It's our only chance," Ilara cut her off. "The armor can get close enough to target their weapon systems directly." Mason watched as 2 officers left quickly to follow her orders. "What kind of armor allows you to fight in space?" Kira's eyes showed a mix of pride and worry. "Galatian battle armor is special. Neural interfaces allow the wearer to control it like it's their own body. Force fields protect against vacuum and weapons. It can fly between ships and carry enough firepower to damage a cruiser." One person against an entire fleet. Mason looked doubtful. "It's happened before," Kira said. "Our greatest warriors have turned battles with those suits." Ilara touched a control on her wrist, and a door at the back of the command center slid open. Inside stood a gleaming suit of armor, tall and slender like the Galatians themselves. Blue energy lines pulsed across its silver surface. "I need 5 minutes to sync with the neural interface," Ilara said. "Hold them off until then." As she walked toward the armor, Mason called after her, "Be careful out there." Ilara paused and looked back at the human captain. "If I don't return, get your people to safety. The escape pods are on level 3. The ship trembled again as the Vectol continued their assault. Time was running out, and everyone knew it. Their only hope now rested with Ilara and her battle armor. The armor closed around Ilara like a second skin. Small lights turned on across its surface as the neural interface connected to her mind. She felt the familiar sensation of the suit becoming part of her. Her thoughts could now control the armor as easily as she controlled her own body. "Neural sync complete," she announced. Opening airlock sequence. Mason and the others watched on the main screen as Ilara moved toward the airlock chamber. Her movements were smooth and powerful in the battle suit. The armor made her taller and stronger, yet she moved with grace. "Be careful, Commander," Kira said through the communication system. "The Vectal flagship has unusual energy readings. Their weapons may be modified." "Understood," Ilara replied. Her voice sounded calm, but Mason noticed a slight tension in it. The airlock opened, and Ilara launched herself into space. The armor's thrusters pushed her forward at incredible speed. On the command center screen, she appeared as a streak of silver and blue light against the darkness of space. "Targeting their main weapon arrays," she reported. "I'll try to disable their largest ship first." Mason watched in amazement as Ilara darted between enemy fighters. The armor's built-in weapons fired precise shots, disabling smaller ships without destroying them. She moved faster than seemed possible, changing direction instantly to avoid return fire. "She's incredible," Lisa whispered beside him. "Their main cannons are turning toward her position," a Galaxian officer warned. "They've spotted her." On screen, the massive Vectal flagship rotated slowly, bringing its largest weapons to bear on the tiny figure of Ilara. She was already halfway to her target, weaving through debris and disabled ships. "Commander, change course," Kira called urgently. Their main cannons air. A blinding flash filled the screen. The Vectal flagship had fired its main weapon. The energy beam was enormous, lighting up space like a new sun. Everyone in the command center held their breath. When the light faded, they searched the screen for Ilara. "There," Mason pointed. The armor was still intact, but something was wrong. The blue energy lines across its surface were flickering. Ilara's movement had become erratic. "Commander Voss, report status," Kira called. Ilara's voice came through broken and distorted. "Direct hit. Shields failing. Neural interface damage." They watched helplessly as she tumbled through space, no longer in control of her flight path. The armor's thrusters fired randomly, pushing her further away from the Galaxian ships and toward a small moon orbiting nearby. "Can you regain control?" Kira asked, her voice tight with worry. "Negative. Power cells compromised. Losing." The transmission cut off. "We're losing her signal," an officer reported. "The armor's communication system must be damaged." Mason stepped forward. "Can you track her trajectory?" The officer nodded, typing commands into his console. "She's falling toward the moon's surface. Impact in approximately 6 minutes. We need to send a rescue team," Mason said firmly. Kira turned to him, her expression grim. "We can't. The Vectal are moving in for the kill. We have to focus on protecting the remaining ships." As if to prove her point, the ship shook violently. Warning lights flashed across every console. "Direct hit to engines," someone reported. "We're losing power to decks 5 through 8. "Seal those sections," Kira ordered. "Redirect remaining power to weapons and shields." Mason looked at the tactical display. The situation was growing desperate. 3 Galaxian ships destroyed, 2 heavily damaged, and their own flagship losing power. The human vessels were performing evasive maneuvers but couldn't do much against the larger Vectal warships. "What about Commander Voss?" Mason asked. "If she survived the crash, the armor will keep her alive," Kira explained, not meeting his eyes. "But without the armor's defensive capabilities, she's stranded." Mason made a decision. He turned to Lisa. "Find Rogers and the engineering team. Tell them to meet me at Shuttle Bay 2. "What are you planning?" Kira asked, suspicion in her voice. "Commander Voss risked everything to save us," Mason replied. "I'm not leaving her stranded on that moon." If the armor is damaged, maybe we can fix it. That's Galactic technology. You wouldn't understand. We're pretty good at fixing things, Mason cut her off. Especially in desperate situations. It's kind of our specialty. Before anyone could stop him, Mason was already heading for the door, determined to save the woman who had just tried to save them all. Mason ran through the corridor toward Shuttle Bay 2. The ship shook around him as more Vectol weapons found their mark. Lights flickered, and in some sections, emergency barriers had closed to contain damage. When he reached the shuttle bay, Rogers and 2 other engineers were already waiting. Rogers was a stocky man with grease-stained hands and a determined expression. Next to him stood Carla Diaz and Sam Wilson, both looking worried but ready. "Lisa told us your crazy plan," Rogers said. "You really want to land on that moon in the middle of a space battle." "Commander Voss risked her life trying to save all of us," Mason replied. "We can't leave her there." Rogers nodded. "Fair enough. But what makes you think we can fix alien armor? We've never even seen how it works." "We're quick learners," Mason said, leading them toward a small Galactic shuttle. "And right now, we're her only hope." They boarded the shuttle, and Mason took the pilot's seat. The controls were different from human ships, but he had received basic training during the diplomatic preparations. The engines hummed to life as he activated the launch sequence. "This is Captain Grant to Command Center," he called through the communication system. "We're taking Shuttle 4 to the moon's surface." Kira's voice came through, sounding frustrated. "Captain, this is against protocol. We need every person to defend the ships." "You need Commander Voss more," Mason replied. "We'll bring her back." Before Kira could argue further, Mason guided the shuttle out of the bay and into open space. The battle still raged around them. Vectol ships fired on the remaining Galatian vessels, while debris from destroyed ships floated everywhere. "Hold tight," Mason warned as he pushed the shuttle to full speed, diving between 2 enemy fighters. "This might get rough." The small shuttle was faster and more maneuverable than the Vectol expected. They slipped past the main battle and headed toward the moon where Ilara had crashed. "I'm tracking her armor's emergency beacon," Carla said, looking at the shuttle scanner. "It's faint, but it's there. She's on the dark side of the moon." Mason adjusted their course. The moon grew larger in their viewport, its gray surface covered in craters and dust. "Landing in 2 minutes," he announced. "Rogers, what do we know about Galactian armor?" Rogers pulled up information on his tablet. "Not much. It's powered by energy cells similar to our fusion tech, but more advanced. The neural interface is the complicated part. It connects directly to the wearer's nervous system. If the power cells are damaged, could we adapt something from the shuttle?" Mason asked. "Maybe," Sam said thoughtfully. "The principles should be similar, even if the technology is more advanced." The shuttle shook as they entered the moon's thin atmosphere. Mason carefully guided it toward the beacon signal. Through the viewport, they could see a deep groove cut into the surface where something had crashed and skidded to a stop. "There." Carla pointed to a glint of metal in a small crater. Mason set the shuttle down about 50 meters away. They quickly put on their environmental suits. The moon had no atmosphere, and temperatures on the dark side were dangerously cold. "Oxygen check," Mason said, testing his suit's systems. "We have 3 hours of air. Let's make them count." The 4 humans stepped out onto the moon's surface. Their boots sank slightly into the fine dust. Above them, flashes of light from the battle illuminated the sky in brief, violent bursts. They made their way to the crater, moving carefully in the low gravity. At the bottom lay Ilara's armor, damaged and silent. Parts of it were crushed from impact, and the once bright energy lines were dark. The helmet was partially open, revealing Ilara's face. Her silver skin looked pale, and her eyes were closed. "Is she?" Carla began. Mason knelt beside the Galatian commander and checked for signs of life. To his relief, he felt a faint pulse. "She's alive, but barely," he said. "The armor must have protected her during the crash, but it's not supporting her anymore. Rogers was already examining the damaged armor. Power system is completely fried. Neural interface is damaged but might be salvageable. We need to get her back to the shuttle. No, Mason said firmly, looking up at the battle still visible in the sky. The shuttle could be targeted. Our best chance is to fix the armor here. It's her best protection, and our best weapon. Rogers looked doubtful. Fix alien technology with our limited tools in these conditions. That's impossible. Mason's expression hardened. Maybe for most species, but for humans, it's just another problem to solve. Alara woke slowly, her eyes adjusting to the dim light. She felt a sharp pain in her side and realized she was lying on rocky ground. The familiar connection to her armor was gone. Instead, she felt cold and vulnerable. "Try not to move," a voice said. "You took a bad hit." She turned her head slightly and saw Mason kneeling beside her. His face was visible through his helmet visor, concerned but focused. Beyond him, she could see 3 other humans examining parts of her damaged armor. "What happened?" she asked, her voice weak. "The Vectal flagship hit you with some kind of energy weapon," Mason explained. "Your armor protected you from the worst of it, but you crashed on this moon. We came to find you." Alara tried to sit up but winced in pain. "The battle still going on," Mason said, gently helping her into a sitting position. "Your ships are holding their own, but they need help." She looked at the humans working on her armor. "What are they doing?" "Trying to fix it," Mason said simply. "Rogers was a repair specialist before joining my crew. Carla designed power systems for the Mars colonies, and Sam worked on environmental suit interfaces. If anyone can get your armor working again, it's them." Alara shook her head weakly. "Impossible. The neural interface alone takes years to understand. Our best technicians train their whole lives to maintain these suits." Mason smiled slightly. "We're pretty good at figuring things out on the fly. It's how we survived on Earth for so long." Rogers approached them, holding a damaged component in his gloved hands. "Captain, I found the main problem. The power distribution node is completely fried. Without it, nothing else works." "Can you fix it?" Mason asked. Rogers frowned. "Not with what we have here. We need a replacement part." But what?" "I saw something on our way in," Rogers said. "About half a kilometer east. Looks like wreckage from a Galactic ship. Might have crashed recently or been here for years. Hard to tell with no atmosphere to cause weathering." Mason turned to Alara. "Would a ship like that have compatible parts?" She thought for a moment. "Possibly. Our smaller scout ships use similar power systems, just scaled-down versions." "It's worth checking," Mason decided. He looked at Carla. "Stay here with Commander Voss. Sam, Rogers, you're with me." Carla nodded, moving to sit beside Alara, while the 3 men started walking across the lunar surface toward the distant wreckage. "Why are you helping me?" Alara asked after they left. "You barely know me or my people." Carla adjusted a small heater next to Alara to keep her warm. "That's just what humans do. We help when we can. Even strangers, even aliens. Especially then," Carla said with a smile. "We're curious by nature, and helping you means learning about your technology, which is a bonus." Alara watched as Carla carefully organized the armor parts they had removed. "You said you worked on Mars." "Yes, designing power systems for the first permanent colonies. We had to make them work with limited resources and be repairable with whatever was on hand." "That sounds difficult." "It was," Carla agreed. "But it taught us to be creative, to see possibilities where others might see only problems." Meanwhile, Mason, Rogers, and Sam reached the crashed ship. It was indeed a Galactic scout vessel, its hull cracked open like an egg. The front section was crushed beyond recognition, but the rear compartment was mostly intact. "There's the engine room," Rogers said, pointing to an opening in the hull. "If anywhere has what we need, it's in there." They carefully climbed through the damaged structure, their helmet lights illuminating the dark interior. The ship had clearly been abandoned for some time, but the Galactian technology was built to last. "Look for anything that resembles a power distribution node," Rogers instructed. It would connect to multiple systems and have energy conduits running into and out of it. Sam moved deeper into the engine room, his light sweeping across unfamiliar technology. "How will we know if it's compatible with the armor?" "The basic principles should be similar," Rogers said, examining a panel of instruments. "Energy is energy, circuits are circuits. The specifics might be different, but the function is the same." Mason lifted a fallen beam to allow access to a sealed compartment. "Like Carla's work on Mars, we adapt what we have to what we need." Suddenly, Sam called out from behind a large piece of machinery. "I think I found something. It looks like a power junction box, and it's still intact." The other two hurried over. Rogers examined the component carefully, his face lighting up with excitement. "This could work," he said. "It's bigger than what we need, but the connections are similar. We'll have to modify it." But you can make it work?" Mason asked. Rogers nodded, already thinking through the process. "I believe so. Humans have been MacGyvering solutions since we invented the wheel." "Mac what?" Sam asked. "Old Earth reference," Rogers said with a grin. "Means making something work with whatever you have available." "Then let's get back to Carla and the commander," Mason said, feeling hopeful for the first time since they'd landed. "We have work to do." Back at the crash site, Carla had carefully laid out all the armor pieces. She worked with small tools from her belt, testing connections and examining damaged parts. Ilara watched with interest, feeling stronger now that the initial shock had worn off. "Your friend Rogers seemed confident he could fix the armor," Ilara said. "Is he always like that?" Carla smiled. "Rogers can fix almost anything. Back on our ship, we joked that he could build a working engine from scrap metal and chewing gum." "Chewing gum? It's a—" "Never mind," Carla laughed. "Earth thing. The point is, he's good at improvising repairs." They looked up as Mason, Rogers, and Sam returned, carefully carrying the salvaged power unit between them. It was larger than what they needed, with strange markings and multiple connection points. "We found it," Rogers announced proudly. "It's from the engine control system of the scout ship. Not a perfect match, but I can make it work." He set the unit down next to the damaged armor and began examining how to connect it. The others watched as he muttered to himself, occasionally asking Sam to hand him a tool. "The neural interface is another problem," Sam pointed out. "Even if we get power restored, the connections to the user are damaged." Ilara shook her head. "Without the neural link, the armor is just a heavy shell. The interface translates my thoughts into movements, controls the weapon systems. Like our brain-computer interfaces back home," Carla said thoughtfully. "We use them for medical patients to control prosthetic limbs." "Similar, but much more advanced," Ilara explained. "Your technology requires external sensors. Ours connects directly to the nervous system." Rogers looked up from his work. "What if we bypass the neural system entirely? Create a manual control method?" "That's never been done," Ilara said. "Because your people never needed to," Mason replied. "You had the neural technology. But humans have been building manual control systems since we first started making machines." Sam nodded, understanding Rogers' idea. "We could adapt some of the shuttle's control systems, create physical inputs that Commander Voss could operate with hand movements." "It wouldn't be as elegant as the neural interface," Rogers added, "but it would be functional. Basic movement, weapons control, life support." "Can you really do that?" Ilara asked, doubt clear in her voice. "We won't know until we try," Mason said. "Carla, go back to the shuttle and get the portable toolkit and the spare control pad from the emergency supplies." As Carla headed for the shuttle, the others continued working. Rogers carefully modified the power unit from the crashed ship, making it smaller and adapting it to connect with the armor systems. Sam examined the neural interface components, trying to understand their function so he could create alternatives. In the sky above them, the battle continued. Flashes of weapons fire illuminated the moon's surface briefly, reminding them of the urgency of their task. Carla returned with additional supplies, and Roger's work gained speed. His hands moved with practiced efficiency, connecting wires, adjusting components, testing connections. Sweat beaded on his forehead inside his helmet despite the suit's cooling system. The biggest challenge is integrating our manual controls with the Galactic systems, he explained as he worked. They never designed this to be operated by anything other than thought commands. Maybe that's why no one has ever tried this before, Mason suggested. Sometimes the simplest solution is overlooked because everyone is focused on the advanced approach. Hours passed as they worked. Ilara grew stronger, occasionally offering insight into how certain armor systems functioned. The humans listened carefully, adapting their repairs based on her knowledge. Finally, Roger sat back on his heels. I think we've got it. The armor lay before them, partially reassembled. The sleek elation design was now interrupted by human additions, a control panel attached to the arm, visible wiring connecting different sections, and the oversized power unit from the crashed ship now modified to fit in the chest area. It's not pretty, Rogers admitted, but it should work. The power system is online, life support functions are operational, and the basic movement controls should respond to manual input instead of neural commands. What about weapons? Ilara asked. Basic functionality only, Sam explained. You won't have the precision targeting of the neural interface, but you can still fire the main energy weapons. Ilara moved closer, examining what they had done to her once elegant battle armor. Instead of the seamless integration she was used to, she saw a patchwork of Galactian technology and human improvisation. It's different, she said carefully. Different isn't always bad, Mason replied. The question is, will you try it? Ilara looked up at the battle still raging in space, then back to the modified armor. Her people were fighting for their lives. This strange, hybrid creation might be their only hope. Let's find out if your human methods really work, she said. Ilara stood still as the humans helped her into the modified armor. It felt heavier than before without the neural interface helping to distribute the weight. The familiar sensation of becoming one with the suit was missing, replaced by the cold touch of metal against her skin. The manual controls are on your right arm, Rogers explained, pointing to the panel they had installed. This lever controls forward movement, this button activates the thrusters, and this dial adjusts power levels. Ilara nodded, trying to memorize each control. Her fingers felt clumsy on the unfamiliar buttons and switches. The weapons system is operated from this panel on your left arm, Sam added. We've simplified it to basic targeting and firing controls. What about the life support? She asked. Automatic, Carla assured her. We kept that system mostly intact. It will maintain oxygen levels and temperature without needing input. Mason watched as Ilara took a few experimental steps. The armor moved, but not with the fluid grace it once had. Each movement was deliberate, mechanical. It's like learning to walk again, Ilara said, frustration in her voice. Take your time, Mason encouraged. You just need to get used to the manual controls. She practiced moving around the small crater, gradually increasing her speed as she became more comfortable with the controls. The thrusters worked, though they required careful adjustment to prevent her from shooting too high in the moon's low gravity. The weapons, she asked after mastering basic movement. Aim with this, Rogers said, showing her a simple targeting system they had rigged up on the left arm. Then press this button to fire. Ilara pointed her arm at a rock about 50 meters away and pressed the button. A blast of energy shot from the armor's built-in weapon, hitting just to the left of her target. Not perfect, but close enough. I can work with this, she decided. She looked up at the battle still visible in the sky. We need to get back up there. Are you sure you're ready? Mason asked. The armor is working, but it's not what I'm used to, Ilara finished for him. It doesn't matter. My people need help, and this is better than nothing. A sudden explosion high above caught their attention. One of the remaining Galatian ships had taken a critical hit, its engines erupting in blue fire. We're out of time, Ilara said grimly. The Vectol are winning. Mason looked at his team, then back to Ilara. What's your plan? The Vectol flagship is their advantage, she explained. If we can disable its main weapons, the other ships might have a chance. We? Rogers asked, raising an eyebrow. Yes, we, Ilara said firmly. I can't do this alone. Not with the armor in this condition. Mason nodded slowly. The shuttle might get us close enough to the flagship for you to board it. It's suicide, Sam protested. They'll shoot us down before we get halfway there. Not if we're smart about it, Mason replied. The battle has created a lot of debris. We can use that as cover, approach from an unexpected direction. Rogers looked doubtful. Even if we reach the flagship, what then? We're not soldiers. No, Ilara agreed. But you are engineers. You understand systems, how things work. The Vectol flagship uses a central control hub for its weapons. If we can reach that, we could shut it down, Carla finished, catching on to the idea. They all looked up as another explosion lit up the sky. The battle was intensifying. It's settled then, Mason decided. We go together, Commander Voss in her armor, the rest of us using whatever weapons we can find on the shuttle. There's something else you should know, Ilara said as they prepared to leave. The Vectol, they're not just attacking because of politics. They fear humans. Fear us? Mason asked, surprised. Why? Because of exactly what you just did, she explained, gesturing to the repaired armor. Most species in our galaxy specialize. They become experts in one area of technology, one way of thinking. But humans, you adapt. You take pieces from different sources and create something new. The Vectol have dominated because no one could match their military technology, until now. Mason considered this as they walked toward the shuttle. So this isn't just about saving your ships. The shuttle rose from the moon's surface, engines straining as Mason pushed them to full power. Through the viewport, they could see the battle had grown worse. Only 2 Galactic ships remained operational, and the human vessels were taking heavy damage. We need to stay out of the main fighting, Mason said as he guided the shuttle along a path filled with debris. The element of surprise is our only advantage. Ilara stood behind him, the repaired armor making soft mechanical sounds as she moved. The flagship's docking bay is on its underside. If you can get us close enough, I can use the armor's thrusters to reach it. And we'll follow in the shuttle, Carla added, checking the simple weapons they had found in the shuttle's emergency locker. Sam monitored the communication system. I'm picking up transmissions between the Galactic ships. They're planning a last stand, concentrating their remaining firepower on the Vectol flagship. That could work in our favor, Rogers noted. While they're focused on the attack from the front, we can approach from below. Mason guided the shuttle carefully, using large pieces of destroyed ships as cover. No one spoke as they drew closer to the massive Vectol flagship. Its dark hull was covered with weapon arrays, and blue energy pulsed along its surface. Almost in position, Mason said quietly. Commander, are you ready? Ilara checked the controls on her armor one last time. As ready as I'll ever be. Remember, once we're inside, we need to find the central weapons control. It should be near the middle of the ship, heavily guarded. How will we know which way to go? Sam asked. I can read Vectol script, Ilara explained. Their ship layouts are standardized. Look for directional markers on the walls. Mason brought the shuttle to a stop behind a large section of destroyed hull, positioning them directly beneath the flagship's docking bay. This is as close as I can get without being detected, he said. From here, we go on foot, or in your case, by thruster. Ilara moved toward the shuttle's airlock. Once I'm inside, I'll try to disable the bay's security systems so you can bring the shuttle in. And if you can't, Carla asked, then be ready for a fight. Ilara replied simply. The airlock cycled open, and Ilara stepped into space. The armor's thrusters fired smoothly as she pushed the control lever forward. She moved more slowly than before, but with purpose, crossing the open space between the shuttle and the flagship's hull. Inside the shuttle, the humans watched anxiously as she reached the docking bay entrance. Ilara used the armor's strength to force open an emergency access panel. She disappeared inside. Long minutes passed. The humans waited, tense and silent. She made it, Sam finally said as the large docking bay doors began to open. Mason didn't waste a second, guiding the shuttle forward into the opening. As soon as they were inside, the doors closed behind them. Ilara waited for them, standing over two unconscious Vectal guards. We need to move quickly. They'll soon notice these guards aren't responding. The humans exited the shuttle, each carrying a weapon. Mason led the way, following Ilara's directions through the massive ship. They moved carefully, hiding whenever Vectal crew members passed by. The weapons control should be 2 levels up, Ilara whispered as they reached the central lift system. We can't use that, Rogers said, pointing to the lift. Too risky. There, Sam pointed to a maintenance access way nearby. That should lead upward. They climbed through narrow passages designed for service droids, emerging on the upper level. Ahead of them, a large door was marked with Vectal symbols. That's it, Ilara confirmed. The weapons control center. How many guards inside? Mason asked. At least 4, plus technicians, she replied. We'll need a distraction. Rogers smiled and held up a small device he had been working on during their journey. I modified one of the shuttle's emergency beacons. It should create quite a commotion if placed near their sensor systems. Perfect, Mason said. Rogers and I will set off the distraction. The rest of you get ready to move in. The plan worked better than they expected. When the modified beacon activated, it triggered multiple alarms throughout the ship. Most of the guards rushed out to investigate, leaving only one at the door. Ilara made quick work of the remaining guard, her armor's enhanced strength easily overpowering him. Inside, the technicians surrendered quickly when faced with armed intruders. Rogers, Carlet, can you figure out how to shut down the weapons? Mason asked. The 2 engineers studied the control panels. It's not so different from our own systems, Carla noted. Power flow, targeting algorithms, firing controls. Here, Rogers pointed to a central console. This looks like the main power distribution for all weapons. While they worked, Ilara used the armor's communication system to contact the Galactic ships. This is Commander Voss. We're aboard the Vectal flagship. Prepare to target their engines when their weapons go offline. Commander, Kira's surprised voice came through. We thought you were lost. Thanks to human ingenuity, I'm very much alive, Ilara replied, and about to even the odds. Rogers gave a triumphant shout as the flagship's weapons suddenly powered down. Throughout the ship, lights dimmed as systems failed. We did more than just disable the weapons, he explained. We created a feedback loop in their power system. They won't be firing anything for quite a while. Through the viewport, they watched as the Galactic ships immediately seized the advantage, concentrating fire on the now defenseless flagship. I think it's time we found an escape pod, Mason suggested as the ship shuddered under the assault. As they made their way to the escape pods, Ilara looked at her repaired armor. It wasn't pretty. It wasn't perfect. But it had worked when she needed it most, just like her unexpected human allies. When we get back, she said to Mason, I believe our people have much to learn from each other. Mason nodded, smiling. That's what humans do best. Learn, adapt, and move forward. Together.